end result of everything I'm after. I'm just trying to make the world a better place, one individual at a time, and be able to make their life better.
To many, Eustace Conway was the face of mountain men. They called him a modern-day Daniel Boone, a man who could step into the wilderness and make it his own. But what if this man who seemed so in control was hiding a life no one expected? What if that image of perfection covered a reality that was far more complex and even dangerous? People tried to warn us about Eustace, but no one listened. Maybe now it's time we finally do. Eustace, controversial personality. Eustace Conway lived off the land in a way we would all read in books. He could start a fire by rubbing sticks together and wore the skins of animals he had hunted and eaten. There was a time he walked the entire Appalachian Trail, wearing nothing but a loincloth for most of the journey. During that trek, he survived almost entirely on what he could hunt or gather along the way. He once rode across the country on horseback in just 103 days, setting a world record. And that wasn't a story from a novel or a movie. Eustace Conway is genuinely a mountain man, and everything about him is as raw and authentic as the wilderness he calls home. While most people spend their lives staring at computer screens and chasing virtual comfort, Eustace chose a completely different path. One built on dirt under his boots, cold winds against his face, and a life in direct contact with nature. But the life he built came with struggles that few ever saw. Eustace had a vision of living like the pioneers, and that dream demanded more than most people could ever give. His discipline was so strict that it repelled many people, including the women who came into his life. Dozens of relationships ended because the romantic idea of loving a man like Eustace never matched the harsh reality of his world. They imagined adventure and freedom, but what they got was long hours of backbreaking work, food that was plain and often scarce, blistered hands, frozen feet in winter, clouds of biting insects in summer, and worst of all, isolation that few could bear. And it wasn't just his partners who left, because even the students who came to Turtle Island left. Students who were genuinely eager to learn from a man they saw as a modern hero often left disappointed and worn out. They came with the dream of working beside a man whom they believed was the last true frontiersman. Unfortunately, their excitement didn't last long. Some left after weeks, some after days, and a few couldn't make it past the first day because the reality was nothing like they expected. Hauling manure, chopping endless piles of wood, and living under Eustace's strict rules quickly shattered their illusions. Many walked away calling him harsh and critical, and even added that his attitude crushed the image they had built in their minds. People called him a modern-day Daniel Boone, a man who could walk into the wild and make it his own. On Mountain Men, he was the face of freedom, proof that a person could live far from the noise of modern life and survive by sheer will. Viewers saw him ride through the woods on horseback, swing an axe that split logs clean in half, and move like he was born in the forest. He appeared calm in every storm and confident in every task. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if the life that looked perfect on screen was hiding a truth no one wanted to face? People who spent time around him tried to warn the world that Eustace was not what he seemed, yet not everybody listened. Eustace Conway was different from anyone you knew. His eyes were sharp enough to see a deer long before it sensed danger. His balance was so steady he could run across a log bridging a river without missing a step, and his reflexes were so quick that nothing ever seemed to catch him off guard. He believed nothing was impossible if he set his mind to it, and he lived every day like he had something to prove. To him, the mission was never just about living off the land. It was about saving America. Because to him, the country was drowning in comfort and distractions, so he dedicated his life to putting it back in place. The Making of Mountain Men. Mountain Men is a reality television series that first aired on the History Channel on May 31, 2012, and it follows the lives of people who choose to live far away from modern society and survive only on what nature gives them. One of the most remarkable men on the show is Eustace Conway, who lives deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina on a piece of land he calls Turtle Island. There, he welcomes people who want to learn how to live in the wild, teaching them the basic skills they need to survive, from building shelter to finding food. Eustace also makes a living by using old and traditional methods to cut firewood. Although his life seemed free and straightforward, he faced a serious problem when a lien was placed on his land. As a result, he had to fight hard to keep the place that meant everything to him. During many of these moments, his close friend Preston Roberts, who often appeared on the show, was by his side. Have you ever thought about what it would feel like to leave behind all the comforts of modern life and live entirely off the grid, without technology, without supermarkets, without a quick solution to things, and only depend on the land around you? This is what men like Eustace Conway, Tom Orr, and Marty Maiorato have chosen, having devoted their entire lives to living in the most natural way possible. But is this life as simple as it sounds? From the rugged Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, where Eustace lives, to the remote Yak River in Montana, where winters stretch for 7 months, these men live in some of the toughest parts of America. Even in the bitter cold of northern Alaska, they face harsh conditions. Every day brings new challenges because nature is unforgiving, and mudslides can wipe out everything in seconds. With trees that fall without warning, violent storms that strike suddenly, and wild animals that are always on the hunt for food, they need to stay alert at all times. Their main goal is to prepare for the brutal winter, as failure to gather enough food and supplies would make survival almost impossible. This constant fight against time and nature makes their lives both dangerous and fascinating. Building Turtle Island Preserve, Eustace Conway is a man who turns his dreams into reality because when he imagines something, he makes sure to build the foundation to hold it. He calls himself a dreamer who puts foundations under his dreams and an activist who, in his own words, gets things done. What makes him stand out is his deep respect for every person's story and the life they lead, because to him, diversity is something to celebrate as we all navigate the human experience. He often says, all things are related in the circle of life. And when he talks about this, he means the bond between people and nature, a bond that forms the heart of everything he teaches. The natural environment is at the heart of my teachings. I have gained great inspiration and direction from the examples of American Indian traditions and feel that even today humans can live in harmony and balance with nature, Eustace explains. His way of teaching is hands-on because, as he says, my way is to share skills and technologies, giving students hands-on involvement with close-to-nature experiences. Through participating in these traditions, one soon comes to realize the role that humans play in the great interconnected web of life. In studying other cultures, we learn more about ourselves and our relationship to all things in this world. He is not only a teacher but also a storyteller and a natural entertainer who knows how to capture the attention of those around him, as his life is full of stories that teach valuable lessons. Eustace is a showman, an educator, an articulate communicator with keen attention to his audience, and he has lifetimes of personal stories that he uses to teach and inspire. One such story is about the time a black snake crawled onto his back and stayed there for 20 minutes before sliding away as peacefully as it had come, leaving him with a memory that spoke of patience and harmony with life. When Eustace first set foot on the land he calls Turtle Island, he said, "When I first walked on this land, Turtle Island, I knew I had found the sacred ground I had been searching for. It matched the vision I had carried since youth, a remote, pristine valley to be kept forever wild." That same week, he bought the first 107 acres of land, and over time he added more land, carved a farm from the forest, and built a program rooted in experiences and guided by a simple motto, simply real. Every day was driven by determination and hard work because, as he says, that became his daily mantra. What he created was more than a place to live. It became a space where people could rediscover what truly matters, stripping life down to its essentials, food, water, shelter, and clothing, so they could see the bigger picture of how everything connects. We simplify our day to food, shelter, water, and clothing, which enables us to see more clearly the picture of how we fit into the bigger circles of life, our food chain, water cycle, ecosystem, and environmental economics. We break rocks to make stone tools, bend bark to fashion baskets, and spin sticks to create fire. We drive horse and buggy, plow gardens, dry wild persimmons, cook stinging nettle, watch the morning light first hit the treetops, and lift a rock in a stream to see what mysteries reside there. We watch a spider weave a web, or 42 butterflies stir at our quiet passing. Eustace believes that all of this brings something back to life inside us, something buried under the noise and speed of the modern world. We enchant the overstimulated, apathetic, bored spirit within us as we wash the dust off by standing in the rain, watching the deer come closer, listening to the wren's call. Not just hearing, but listening to the wild things as if they matter and then realizing that they do. At Turtle Island, you meet people who live in the forest and take full responsibility for what they do every day, because nothing is wasted and nothing is taken for granted. We work with groups of all types, from business professionals to elementary classes. We are eclectic, diverse, spontaneous, and creative. We offer a door to a renewed vision of an ancient natural reality that governs all. With a few sticks and bones, we can wake up your world. But as this dream grew, so did the pressure, and cracks began to show. When pressure started to surface,
up in a pan with some lard that was rendered from a pig, and it's just an amazing taste.
Eustace Conway was resting on a wooden sledge outside the horse barn at his Turtle Island Preserve in Triplet, North Carolina, on a warm June day in 2013. For years, people from all corners of the world had traveled to learn how to live closer to nature and break free from the grip of modern life. They came looking for answers on how to survive off-grid, how to return to the roots of existence, and Turtle Island had become a sanctuary for those dreams. Unfortunately, Turtle Island found itself in trouble because local officials had ordered the place closed, saying it failed to meet health and safety standards. For Eustace, this was hard to accept because in his mind, there were always two worlds: the natural world that Turtle Island represented, and what he called the plastic imitation world where most people lived their entire lives. Yet, he always knew that the border between those two worlds was thin and fragile, and now that truth was staring him in the face. When he first bought the original 107 acres back in 1987, his vision was profound. He wanted Turtle Island to be a tiny bowl in the earth, intact and natural, surrounded by pavement and highways, a green and untouched space that would show people what the world looked like before machines and concrete covered it. Eustace had been living this way for most of his life, having left his parents' suburban home at 17 to walk into the woods and start a new chapter. From that point on, his mission was to preach the value of living sustainably and simply. For more than 30 years, he had been building that dream, but even dreams change over time. The Eustace people met in 2013 was not the same man they imagined from the early stories. The buckskins he once wore as a symbol of a life connected to the earth had been replaced with jeans and a t-shirt. The air around Turtle Island no longer carries only the sounds of wind and birds. Now you can hear the buzz of a chainsaw, and you can see students who came to learn primitive skills discover that Eustace considered dumpster diving just as important as tracking game or catching fish. Why? Surviving in today's world requires more than just traditional methods. And then there was the camera crew, because for 2 seasons, Eustace had been part of the History Channel series Mountain Men. He admitted with a laugh that it was a contradiction because, as he said, "I think television's terrible, so it's a paradox." Still, it was part of a delicate balancing act, as maintaining Turtle Island's existence required resources. The preserve depended on interns and apprentices who traded labor for knowledge. Not only that, it relied on tax-exempt status within a system Eustace had always despised, and it counted on a steady flow of paying visitors to cover costs. Unfortunately, this is where the harmony between his world and the modern one finally collapsed. It all started when someone filed a complaint about unapproved construction at Turtle Island. Soon after, officials from Watauga County's Planning and Inspection Department showed up without warning. What they found shocked them because scattered across the preserve were dozens of structures, ranging from cabins to barns and kitchens, all built without any permits. The county attorney issued an ultimatum. giving Eustace three choices: bring every building up to state safety standards and get the permits, hire an expert to prove the buildings already met those standards, or tear them all down. What followed was no longer just a legal dispute over codes and regulations. It became a clash between two ways of living, a fight between what Eustace called real life and what others saw as reality. And that battle was about to test everything he had spent decades building. This conflict dated back to 2012 when County Planning Director Joe Furman received an anonymous phone call. About a week later, an unmarked envelope arrived with a crudely drawn but surprisingly detailed color-coded map showing buildings, road grading, and wiring, all allegedly done without proper permits, inspections, or engineering. That was the spark that set off a chain of events Turtle Island had never faced before. But here's the question. How could this happen to a man who had spent decades living by his code in harmony with nature? Unlike some of the other mountain men featured on television who live high in the Rockies or deep in Alaska, Eustace was never completely cut off from the modern world. Turtle Island sits near the Tennessee border, only a few miles from Boone, a lively county seat with approximately 17,000 people, whose population doubles when Appalachian State University, the same school Eustace attended, is in session. Beyond the gravel road that leads to the preserve, there are modern homes nestled on wooded lots, and the Blue Ridge Parkway runs close enough that visitors can almost hear the hum of passing cars. But everything changes once you pass through the gates. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to step from modern life into another time? Well, that's what you're about to meet. After crossing a stream that dances over stones, the road opens into a meadow where history seems alive. Around you stands a blacksmith shop, an open-air kitchen and dining hall, a corn crib and other outbuildings that tell a story of old ways still thriving. At the center is the most striking sight, a massive cantilevered barn, built from dovetailed logs and topped with 5,000 hand-hewn shingles, each one moss-covered and weathered by time. And if you're wondering where the name Turtle Island comes from, it was chosen for a reason because it came from an American Indian creation story about a great turtle that saved life from a flood by carrying the world on its back. In the figurative sense, Conway's website explains, "We are an island of wilderness in a sea of development and destruction." But not everyone agreed with that vision. County officials saw something different. After that inspection, Furman says discussions with Conway quickly broke down. So on September 19, he returned with a warrant and sheriff's deputies. This time, they started with Eustace's home and found it lacked even the minimum water and sewer connections required by law. They discovered that all the buildings were made from wood milled on site, rather than the graded and marked lumber required by building codes. Would this be the moment that shattered his dream? As inspectors went deeper into the property, the list of violations grew longer. They noted solar panels that powered Eustace's small office and a micro-hydroelectric plant built by students from Appalachian State University to run a workshop. The inspectors then noted that the wiring and junction boxes didn't meet code. They found a wood stove with a chimney vented beneath a metal roof rather than through it. They also found that the outhouses intended for public use, as well as several buildings resting on stacked stone foundations, were not being properly anchored. In his 78-page report, building consultant W.O. Whaley wrote a warning that could not be ignored. Many of the structures, he said, were not structurally sound, adding that the property in its present state presents a hazard to the safety of anyone near any of the structures. He even recommended getting a court order to vacate Turtle Island to protect the lives of the public and the interns. But Eustace and his supporters saw things differently. To them, this was more than a fight over building codes. It was a battle of values. Eustace asked the question that struck at the heart of the issue. How could he teach the ways of primitive living inside modern, cookie-cutter buildings that stripped away everything his life stood for? The warnings. They tried to warn us that Eustace Conway's life wasn't as simple as it looked, and the first sign came long before the cameras showed up. His biggest battle wasn't with a tax office or a county inspector. It began with an accident on his land, an incident that would haunt him for years to come. So what happened? In August 2005, Kimberly Baker, a 28-year-old from Wilmington, came to Turtle Island for a retreat with the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program. The day began like any other. She and her group stood near the entrance for orientation when one of Conway's staff members pulled out a sling. He wanted to demonstrate how to hurl a stone, an old skill intended to impress visitors. But in a split second, everything went wrong. The rock flew backward and hit Baker in the eye. The damage was permanent, and she lost sight in her right eye. That single moment started a chain of events. Baker sued and, in the end, settled with two of Conway's staff members for $400,000. But Conway wasn't out of it yet. In 2009, he agreed to pay her $75,000 and also promised to mortgage part of his land within a year to cover the payment. When that deadline passed without action, Baker filed another suit for breach of contract. It took until April 2012, right when Mountain Men was filming its early episodes, for Conway to pay finally. Was this the first real crack in the image of the man who seemed untouchable? Because while this was happening, Conway was building the life millions would see on television. "When I go out in public, I try to look like a wild guy who just came off the mountain," he once said in a book by Elizabeth Gilbert called The Last American Man. "I know it's an act. I'm a showman. I give people the picture of how I wish I were living. What else can I do? People expect it." If he admitted it was an act, then how much of what we saw was real? As the lawsuit dragged on, another fight was about to begin, one that would pull in lawmakers and make headlines across the state. When Turtle Island was flagged for building code violations, the backlash was immediate. Watauga County offices were flooded with letters accusing officials of attacking a man's way of life. One petition even asked, "Are government officials upset that someone can survive without them?" The uproar grew so loud that politicians intervened. The Republican-led legislature introduced a bill to exempt primitive camps and farms from strict building codes. Structures like barns, sheds, and outhouses no longer needed to meet modern standards, and Governor Pat McCrory signed it into law on June 12. By the end of that month, Turtle Island was open again, and Conway was back in business. But did that end the warnings? Not even close. On a heavy summer day, Conway stood in the breezeway of his horse barn, talking to a group of campers and interns. The smell of wood smoke and stewing cabbage hung in the air as the chickens scratched at the dirt. It looked like a world frozen in time, but Conway knew better. He told them that life out here wasn't always what the cameras showed. His deal with the History Channel kept him quiet about specific details, but he admitted this much: life out here isn't as dramatic as they want it to be. That one line meant that the man the show called someone who lives for a living was walking a line between two worlds. One was real and the other had to look real on TV. So, where should anyone start if they genuinely want to live closer to the land? Eustace always said that the first step was to understand the basics of life. It boiled down to your food, water, clothes, and shelter. Learn how these things work, but do so at a slow pace. If you've never built anything in your life, don't start with a house. Start small. Build a doghouse first, and then move up from there. He always said his goal was never to drag someone out of their home, rip off their shirt, and throw them into the woods with nothing but a knife. He believed in meeting people where they were, and then slowly teaching them the skills they needed to stand on their own. And then he gave the advice that stuck with many. Sink your feet into reality, because most of us are so disconnected that we don't even know where our clothes come from, how a sewing machine works, or how to thread a simple needle. He could knot a thread at the end of a needle without looking because he practiced it with his hands at 4 years old. Then came his challenge for anyone who wanted to begin: growing their food. Don't think of farms and acres of crops. Start small. Plant 5 radishes and eat them. Yes, that tiny harvest may seem insignificant. However, Eustace always said that taking that small step is the most significant step, because once you taste those radishes, you'll want more. So next time you'll end up planting lettuce, onions, and tomatoes, and before long you'll be building a real garden. But what about Turtle Island? Was it as self-sufficient as people imagined? The truth was no, and Eustace was open about it. Self-sufficiency was never his ultimate goal, even though he came closer to it than most people ever will. He explained that life there was about striking a balance and setting priorities. For example, because he wanted horses, but there wasn't enough open pasture, he had to buy hay. They still used fuel for vehicles and even bought some food from stores. For him, making these allowances wasn't a failure. It was reality, and he never felt ashamed of it. Yet people didn't always understand. Once, someone saw him using a chainsaw to cut firewood and accused him of cheating. Eustace just shook his head because to him, this wasn't a game or some reality show trick. This was how he kept his home warm in the winter. He had cooked and heated with firewood for 30 years. And while he owned axes and crosscut saws for the day when fuel might not be available, he saw no reason to suffer when a chainsaw worked so well. And that leads to a question people still ask. Would Americans ever give up their modern comforts for a life like Eustace's? He didn't think so. He believed that instead of abandoning everything modern, people would find a way to combine the old with the new. He often told the story of how he had given up electricity for 30 years and invited thousands of people to Turtle Island to live without it. Yet not a single one of them gave it up when they went home. That didn't make him give up on them, though. He just changed his approach and said, if they won't stop using electricity, then I'll show them how to make it in a way that doesn't destroy the earth. That's why he built a small hydroelectric system on a creek at Turtle Island, and after visitors saw it, many left inspired to create their own systems. And maybe that was the warning all along. Eustace never wanted to drag the world back to the Stone Age. He only wanted people to take one step back toward reality, to reconnect with what life means. But now, after all the lawsuits, the fights with the state, the tragedy of losing his closest friend, and the pressure of living between the truth and television, the question remains, was the life he fought so hard to teach others the same life he was able to hold on to? Or was it slowly slipping away the moment the cameras arrived? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, explore the other videos on your screen.